A 7¼ inch gauge Sweet William steam locomotive, part 46. Removing and cutting the tank mounting bracket to size, allowing it to support the saddle tank. It will be functional and look stylish at the same time. Painting the running boards with satin black paint. In this clip it's quite difficult to make out which bit is which. The bracket is at the top and it spans the frames. It's bolted to the frame stretcher, and in this clip, as you can see, I've removed one of the bolts. Here's another clip showing the other side. It's very confusing if you don't really know what it is, but it will make more sense once I remove the mounting bracket from the frames. The copper piping that you can see is the plumbing for the twin axle pump, where it takes the water from the tank and the pump outlet goes to a bypass valve before returning to the check valve on the boiler. As you can see, or in this case can't see, I'm removing all of the nuts and bolts that secure the mounting bracket to the stretcher. Then, just to slow the job down, I noticed that one of the water pipes on the other side from the hand pump to the boiler goes through a hole in the bracket. This meant that I had to unspanner the union nut from the water pump at the back of the engine and pull the pipe, including the union nut, through the hole. Then I could remove the bracket. Some viewers may be wondering what I'm going to do with the cylinders. As you can clearly see in this image, there are two holes designed to hold cladding in place, but there isn't any cladding. Maybe I should make some cladding and then paint the cylinder the same colour as the rest of the engine, which of course is black. One thing at a time though. At the moment I'm working on this bracket. I'm taking some measurements to see how much of it I have to cut off so I can mount the tank and make it look good. I gave this job a bit of thought. My original idea was far too complicated. This will be a lot simpler, and when the job is completed it should look like it's always been there. This clip is confusing. The bracket doesn't mount the tank at this point. I'm just sitting it on the original brackets which fasten to the cab to get the length to be the same. I need to cut off 1 3/8 inch from each end. I've marked the position where I'm going to cut, so now it's over to the bandsaw and the video is running at a high speed to get through the job quickly, and you can see I'm cutting it off, carefully following the line. First at one side, and then I turn the part over to cut the other side. Even with the video running at normal speed, it didn't take very long. I just wanted to get this job out of the way. And now it's into the outer part of the workshop, and I'm cleaning up the end of it on my 4-inch belt sander. I'm just rounding the end to make it look better and removing all traces of the saw cuts from the edges. This was a quick and simple job, like the cutting. Here's the story so far. Now you can see that the mounting bracket that fastens to the stretcher is the same length as the mounting brackets on the tank that fasten it to the cab. When this bracket is repainted and bolted back to the locomotive, it will be much nearer to the front of the saddle tank. I need to make sure there are no sharp edges for two reasons. One is I don't want to cut myself on them, and the other one is paint does not stick very well to a perfect right angle that's a bit rough. I started the job using a needle file at a slightly slower speed than this, but I really got fed up of it. Time to call in the cavalry in the shape of a Proxxon mini angle grinder. This made short work of the sharp edges. I'm being very careful to make sure that the flapper wheel doesn't slip and mark any areas where I don't want it to. After removing all of the sharp edges and giving the rest of the paintwork a light sanding, it's back in the outer part of the workshop to give the part a coat of etching primer. I didn't just coat the bare metal though, I painted the entire part. And for this job I'm using a can of HMG Paint's 1K etch primer. Here's the usual shot of the paint drying, and now, while this is happening, I'm going back into the inner part of the workshop with a can of Satin Black Paint. I enjoy using rattle cans. I find them very useful things. The spray jet is very controllable relative to how hard you press the button on the top. I have a piece of wet to dry sandpaper to prevent parts being painted that I don't want to be painted. It doesn't have to be wet to dry sandpaper, any piece of thin card would do the job. The middle part of the buffer beam looks a bit rough because this isn't bright mild steel, it's the rough stuff. Moving on now to the other side, you can see how I hold the piece of wet to dry sandpaper in position. And I can paint just where I want to paint, not where the paint wants to go. Yes, I could have used polythene bags and masking tape, and I've done that before, but in this case it didn't seem worth the time and effort. I gave each side 2 coats. These are edited extracts from the painting, and I think I got good coverage just about everywhere I wanted it to be. If any of the paint was to go where I didn't want it, for instance on the copper ring around the firebox, a quick wipe using cellulose thinners or lacquer thinner would soon remove any paint residue from this area. The hardest part of this job was getting full coverage, particularly around the nuts on the running boards. By the time I painted the running boards, the etch primer on one side of the bracket was dry, so I could turn it over to paint the other side. A good feature of this is the original paint at one side was marked, so I have to remember this is the side that goes up against the frame stretcher. I left the paint on the bracket drying in the outer part of the workshop and went back into the main workshop to see what the paint was looking like on the running boards, and it looks fine. I was able to paint the reversing lever too by putting the piece of wet to dry sandpaper behind it. This method really does work and it's quick, but I must mention it's not quite as easy as I'm making it look. I've had a lot of practice. It's really down to how far and how often you depress the top part that lets the paint out. It's starting to look good now, and that's it from me. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.